Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar. The third in this customer growth series, and really excited for this one, and glad so many of you are on the line. And as we get more folks coming in, we'll just give them a minute. But again, for just a reminder, today we're going to be talking about market intelligence and specifically kind of how you should be thinking about using it across major marketplaces, specifically kind of in the Amazon and Walmart timeframe. So what's out there, where are some gaps, what you should be aware of depending on what you're looking to do. So we're going to cover a lot of stuff here, and just some housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar will be recorded, and you'll receive a recording of this webinar roughly 24 hours after the conclusion. And then additionally, you'll receive this full slide deck so you can kind of review it at your leisure as you go through, share it with teammates, etc. And as we go through, right, we're going to have time for Q&A at the end. But at any time during the presentation, you have a question that comes up, definitely pop it in the question box just as it enters your mind. And we're going to get to kind of as many as we can kind of at the end of the webinar, but you don't have to wait till the end to enter your questions, right? You can do it at any time. And if you have a question that we're not able to get to, we're definitely going to try to get to those via email after the fact. So feel free to enter them as the case may be as they come up. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We have Alon Maltsov here up at the top, who is a general manager of market intelligence over here at Teikametrics. We also have Ryan Goldstein, who's the founder of AirVinyl. And myself, I'm Andrew Weber, the Director of Insights over at Teikametrics. So maybe Alon, if you could kind of talk about kind of your journey coming here. I know you initially started out, you'd founded a company called Adjusty, and which was recently acquired by Teikametrics. But if you could talk a little bit about yourself and kind of your experience kind of in this space.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, I'm super excited to be here and have this webinar going on. We started our journey, my co-founder and I, around 3 years ago when we realized that Amazon is growing like crazy, mainly as advertising aspect. And we realized that there's a gap in the market. It's kind of like a black box that no one really knows how it works. And a lot of data points are missing. We're comparing stuff from the world of Google and Facebook. There's a lot of tools that basically helps you better understand what's going on, who's your competitors, how your listing, how your ad looks like, and so on. This is how kind of we started Adjustico. 2.5 years after, we decided to join forces with Teikametrics and take our technology and embedded it in Teikametrics flywheel. And we're super excited to show you what we are about to launch.
Great. And Ryan, could you talk a little bit about AirVinyl and kind of your journey as a seller?
Yeah, so I'm the founder of AirVinyl, which was the first e-commerce brand that I started. Yes, back at this point was in 2017. Now I'm currently a partner at Agent Retail, where I work on managing a series of brands that we both own or work on from an agency perspective. So these range from beauty and supplements to cookware to still AirVinyl and AirPod accessories. So kind of a wide net of various products, and so been deep into operating brands for the last few years now.
Great, thanks so much. Yeah, definitely excited and a lot of great experience here. So next, I want to kind of go through what we're building with Flywheel 2.0 as kind of an overview. And to kind of bring us back, when Teikametrics was kind of getting into the advertising space on Amazon, we launched this product called Sponsored Product Optimizer. And again, this is really focused on Amazon specifically and only ad optimization, right? We wanted to help people with those sponsored products ads that you see obviously on the Amazon search page, optimize those, bid better, place those better. Then in 2019, we kind of upgraded that with Flywheel. Now this was still Amazon only and ad optimization, but also included product data, is a much richer feature set, allowed sellers to do a lot more with the software. And that's been working really well for the thousands of brands we work with. But as we look kind of towards the future of what e-commerce is building, there's a need to link up kind of ad optimization with a bunch of other functionality that you kind of naturally need to manage as part of running your business. And each of these has an impact on one another. For instance, the way your inventory is managed and how what inventory you have available, right, should impact your ad strategy. If you're for instance, if you're in danger of running out of stock, you don't want, if your ad is running very well and is getting a lot of sales, you may want to pause that down, because going out of stock obviously is very negatively impacts your Amazon SERP rank, etc. So there's all these things that need to work in consort. So the idea behind Flywheel 2.0 is giving you a view and tying some of these things together so that just make you a better business across each of these individual aspects of your business. So that's kind of the overarching view of why we're building the software. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but this webinar is going to be more focused on the experiences of brands like Ryan's, and then generally what Alon has seen kind of throughout his experience, both at and prior to Teikametrics. So this customer growth series, again, this is the third part of this ongoing series. The desire is to kind of talk about real stories and best practices kind of as they hit the ground, right? We can talk theoretical, but what can you take away from this webinar that's going to help make you a better seller? And really just make you think maybe a little bit differently, especially in this case, right? The holiday season, it's in full gear, but let's really talk about 2021, right? The time is now to really start thinking about the changes you can make to put yourself in a much better position as the calendar turns over, and just all the other things you can do there. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what the agenda is for today. So first, I'm going to kind of hand it over to Alon, who's going to talk more about the landscape in general, right? There's no shortage of free or paid tools out there when it comes to giving you a view into a specific marketplace, a specific category that you operate in. But what are kind of some of the options out there? And then kind of transition to key challenges, right? Of those options that are out there for you, what should you be aware of that can kind of trip you up? And there's some good commentary there. And then, okay, well, going forward, where should you focus depending on the stage of your business, depending on what you're looking to do, right? There's different things that you want to pay attention to. And similarly, right, how do you use market intelligence to address certain business purposes that you need to execute on in the immediate future? Because what you want to do with certain bits of information is definitely different if, for instance, you're a well-heeled, very well-established brand in a particular vertical versus someone who, I haven't been in this marketplace and I'm investigating or something, right? There's very different things you need to look at. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to wrap up with Q&A at the end of the presentation. So as we go through, please enter your questions into the question box there. We'll get to, again, as many of those as we possibly can. And for those of you that just hopped on, you will be getting a recording of this presentation if you miss anything, along with the slide deck. So just answer those questions there. And with that, let's get into the landscape there.
Yeah. So usually when we're looking at market intelligence and sellers or people that are active in this area, we like to divide them into two. One sector is the marketer, e-commerce marketer, which it could be an active seller with a small GMV or up to millions of dollars of GMV, who actually is trying to improve their performance. They're doing it through different aspects and different tools, but that's one area. The other area is people that just want to join and start selling online. It could be existing e-commerce sellers that are trying to launch a new product and new brands, or just people that just hopped in and wanted to start researching and see what you can do. That's mainly the two areas that we are trying to tackle when we're talking about market intelligence and in general. And I think, Ryan, you can share a little bit about your journey, because I think you played into these two scenarios all the time.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. People look at, market intelligence or market tracking tools and do apply it a lot into the research phase of, maybe trying to figure out which products they want to sell or, categories that they want to expand into. But it's really interesting how much you can use it during operations as well. I think it's something that, everyone thinks to use it during maybe that initial phase, but in the last 2 years, I mean, I found myself trying to really bring in a lot of that continued research as I'm operating. So both of these two different aspects make a big difference when it comes to not only launching your brand, but continuing to grow your brand, which is obviously the goal of everyone who's starting an e-commerce business.
Definitely. And if we are talking about the tools that we have, or some examples of what actually Ryan and other folks are measuring, usually it starts with a lot of different tools that are not connected to your same platform. So you would use outside tools that will download the data, put it in Excel sheet, do your magic, and upload it back again through a different platform. A lot of them are gathering a lot of data from different resources, and it's super, super important to understand what's the key challenges, which we will talk about in a bit, but also kind of insights that you're trying to gather. One of the things that we realized while working on Adjustico and now with Teikametrics is some insights that we still don't understand how people are advertising without those inputs. So for example, one of them is your organic rank position. When you advertise on a product, you're trying basically to improve your organic rank, but currently through the Amazon's API, you don't have any information on where your ad product is basically positioned. Ryan, how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it's a cumbersome process, going through all of this, and I think there's two aspects of it that I really think about. I mean, even just looking at organic rank position, I mean, there are times when for things like that, I used to manually just go to Amazon and, when I was launching a product and I wanted to see how I was doing on a certain keyword, I would go every day and I kept an Excel sheet of typing that in and I'd count where my product was, which is needless to say, not very doable for a full catalog and different keywords. But the other aspect that I think has been really interesting, Alon, is I've been talking to you more and more about it, is as you said, there are tools that kind of are pulling from different areas, maybe different platforms, different times, and when I use these tools, I tend to just maybe trust whatever they're sending my way, but even sometimes when I would check it manually in there, they would be different. So it is a lot of manual, and can you trust some of the results that you see sometimes when it's being pulled from different areas?
Yeah, definitely. And another aspect that brought to the market back, I would say 2 years ago, is kind of the share of voice. And what does it mean? So share of voice basically means once let's say we're looking at it from the commerce area, and you'll go to a supermarket and you have aisles of products, and you usually would know which products are next to your product. So if I'm selling a cereal box, I would know which brands are next to me, the prices, and I would get some of estimation on how much they're selling and how my products are positioned next to them. In the e-commerce world, especially in Amazon, that's just a black box. You have no idea who is next to you. And one of the things that we did and provided is kind of an understanding of what's the share of voice. How many products are listed on the first page under any search term? So imagine that every search term is kind of another market, is another supermarket. So you could play around in that market and which product are next to you, what the prices are, who is moving fast, the fast movers, and so on. And that's one of the insights that a lot of people are starting to utilize more and more and better understand, kind of in brand protections and a lot of other stuff. So that's a super, super interesting area to tackle. Another feature that we saw is kind of the reverse sensing capability, mainly for launching new products. So you want to know who's your competitor, so you can can find them manually on Amazon, and then you put an ASIN and get a list of search terms that he's advertised on or positioned on. And it's a lot of insights that can help you better understand your market in general. Brian, in terms of those tools, so I assume that you used some other tools out there and did some analysis. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that really is kind of the way that I approach it is, especially, let's take, for example, just in the research phase, as I'm looking at these competitor products, I'll go on to Amazon and see how would I try and find that product and find a product that comes up that's doing well, and then use something to, like these reverse ASIN tools, to then pull all the keywords that come up for them. And you mentioned it, this concept of every keyword really is its own marketplace. And so you have to understand how each one of these is specifically operating, and then looking into that and seeing for certain keywords, where are they coming up, and which one should you be targeting because of that. It's definitely a very involved process, but it's something that's really important to understand, as you're looking at maybe not just competitors, but putting that together with the keywords that they may be competitors on. Because certain keywords, they may not show up, you may be trying to show up. So, all of this kind of works together, and it's something that any one of these individually doesn't really help. You do need a full picture of everything that's going on.
Yeah. And another thing that we have from a lot of customers, and that's one of the, I would say, gold mine, is to better understand your market share. How much money there is in the market, who is the main competitors, what's the revenue that I can generate from that market? Is it a red ocean, a blue ocean? What's the opportunity there's? And that comes to kind of the category that you're trying to be ranked on.
Yeah.
All in all, go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about that on the market share aspect, which I think is particularly important, given the current climate where you have essentially, right, a lot of sellers saw kind of baseline numbers when it comes to sales kind of across the year, right, increase, because obviously more people are going to online channels generally. But the important thing is, okay, are you outpacing your competitors? Because you could have sales that year over year, they've gone up 20, 30%, which if you just look at yourself, you're like, that's awesome, I'm doing great. But if your overall market, is growing 40%, well, you're actually pacing behind your competitors in that case. And it's important to kind of at least have some view into what that's looking like. How is a larger growth in the market at a high level, and how do you track against that? So you can kind of have a better idea of, am I doing both subjectively and objectively well as you kind of set your strategy?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think that if you can go to the next slide, I think that will be a bit interesting to kind of talk about the key challenges here, because as we mentioned, there's a lot of tools that capture data. So if we look at it, mainly two areas. So one of them is we can get data from the marketplace's API. Amazon is providing some of the data. It's super accurate because obviously Amazon is capturing it. The availability is pretty good. I mean, some reports you can get on a daily basis, some you can get an API access. But the problem here is that there's super limit in visibilities. Meaning, currently we know how many people are searching for a certain word. Most of the tools are utilizing the impression to better understand how could we rank on it, but we don't really know where the product is positioned. Even if we're advertisement or search them, we don't know if it's the advertisement is on the first page, second page, top of the font, the first position, the middle, and who is basically out with you and stuff like that. And in the second area, we have a lot of other tools that are capturing data. And so it gives you a wider visibility, and the structure is super important for you to take and basically plug it to your APIs. It's super hard to get this data, and the accuracy is one of the major things that we need to talk about. There's a lot of ways to capture this data. It needs to be super organized to actually become meaningful and reduce the noise in the data. And I think, Ryan, you can share a little bit more about tools that you've been exposed to that you've been using.
Yeah. I mean, and I think this also kind of goes back to what I was saying just about where the data is coming from. With a lot of the market intelligence tools, whatever decisions you're going to make are, again, very important to how either you're doing your product research, which is setting your foundation, or operating your business. And you do have to have this level of trust that what is coming to you is actually the right information in here. And so, this has been an interesting one, again, Alon, like as I've been talking to you more and learning about where does the data come from, how does it come in here? It does kind of make you think a little bit more about this really critical data that I'm using, how good is it? And, knowing which ones are maybe really accurate versus ones that, it's a little bit more challenging to create that in more of an accurate way, is really important to know. And it's critical to being able to make these decisions the right way.
Looks like we lost Alon's video momentarily. I believe he's still yeah, he's still on. It's just like we lost a video. I mean, we could talk through a little bit in this next slide, kind of when you're looking across marketplaces and what the challenges are. And as we look through, location is really important. And I think this is sometimes lost on folks. I mean, Ryan, right? You were talking about how earlier, right? It's like I'm going to go and I'm going to look at Amazon and see where my stuff is, placed. The issue is, right, what even if you're in incognito and all that, right, there is, other things that Amazon will do to actually put things in front of you, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
So it just changes dramatically. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see some of that stuff, even, again, location, time of day, obviously, especially when you talk about looking at things that are maybe paid advertisement, someone maybe could be bidding really high with a lower budget and they show up, high in the morning, but then when they run out of budget, they're not showing up. So there's a lot, I mean, that comes into that in terms of, location, time of day, like all of that really is, that changes that information.
Yeah, and it's super interesting because when this is actually one of the things when Alon was talking about those the data capture tools. This is the one, I think, a big caveat, depending on how they're architected, is what are they capturing and from where and how are they doing it? Because obviously, if you are just capturing it from a single location, you're only going to get a slice. And how do you then provide some kind of information on what's really going on? I mean, obviously, even that is kind of a subjective measure, but to provide you kind of with the best directional information in terms of what's showing up where, and at a general level, how are you doing? So the next one, and Alon, feel free to jump in here, is kind of on different attributes, right? I think when you look across marketplaces, the way Amazon architects its SERP page, which may be redundant, just SERP, and the way Walmart organizes its SERP is very different. How they place ads there, for instance, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is on Amazon, right? I can have multiple sponsored listings and organic listings for the same product on the same SERP page, right? I can have a sponsored brands placement, I can have a sponsored products placement, and then I can have my organic placement. So I can show up 3 times for the same product on a given SERP. But on Walmart, they intentionally, just for what they determined was a kind of better for the consumer, is they only allow a product to show up once. And even they've recently expanded this, but for a long time, it was even only certain portions of the SERP were even available for ads. So, the way you reconcile that as you kind of take it in as a brand and try to determine what's your best course of action, right? You need to think about this in a marketplace specific context and what that means, right? If your competitor's showing up from a share of voice, right? If they can show up 3 times on a given SERP with the same product, that's very different, right? You don't even have that ability on Walmart. So, I mean, Alon, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the location is one of the key aspects here. And I'm sure that I have heard a little bit, sorry for jumping out. When you're gathering the data, if you're not gathering it in the same time from the same location, basically you add a lot of noise to the data and it's not actionable. If you want to actually build a solution that is good enough, you have to make sure that the data is captured in the same way. Amazon is keep changing a lot of things in their website, adding more ads, and Walmart obviously just added a few more ad placements. So this stuff continues, there's continuing changes, and you need to make sure that the data that you're relying on is super accurate. One of the easiest example is if you just gonna search one search term on Amazon from New York and LA, you're just gonna see a different search page. So that's one of the key aspects here. And I think also when we're, as Andrew, as you mentioned, when you're comparing between marketplaces, it's super important to know how to do that, and also to have one single source of truth. When you're gathering data from different sources and trying to connect it to your own data, first of all, it's a lot of manual work, but second of all, some of the data is not structured in the same way, which ruined the experience and probably will ruin the results.
Yeah, I think it's I know we're going to keep coming back to location here, but I think even we were talking about this in the context of Amazon and Walmart, but even within Amazon, right? You could even look at just two different European marketplaces, and obviously, I mean, let alone the SERP, right, is going to be different. Obviously, you're talking different countries, different languages potentially, but then additionally, even when you look at how do consumers behave, right? The behavior that if it's like on a given sponsored product ad that shows up on a same search term in between these two Amazon marketplaces, like you may see very different, different, whether it's win rates, whether it's, conversion rates on those same ads, and right, the way you take actions obviously needs to be marketplace specific again, because they are so different. And maybe Ryan, I mean, I know, as you've kind of looked at both maybe between, different product classes or different marketplaces, kind of how have you kind of reconciled this idea that like, right, it's like, well, there's apples to apples, but there's some ways I have to kind of think about these individually.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the idea of like where things, I mean, that partnered with the idea of where things actually show up on the page, I mean, is important. I think something that like people think about a lot is if I'm organically, number one, do I need to pay for a sponsored product or a sponsored brand? Like, am I just paying extra to get a sale I would have gotten anyway? But again, I think it does come down to, it's more complicated than that. It is a little bit like the user behavior, like you were saying, maybe if those two are together, do people end up, purchasing because they're seeing it twice? Or maybe you're not in the top spot, but organically you are, and your sponsored product comes up midway down the page. So, I think that there's a lot of aspects to just the way that things are displayed on those pages that you have to take into consideration, and it does come down to your coverage on that page. If it's not you, it's going to be someone else, and that's just a competitor for you. So I think it's an interesting way to kind of think about, and especially when you talk about different markets where on Walmart that's not the case. You don't have that option. In different European markets, it may operate differently than what you're seeing in the U.S. marketplace. So all of that kind of has to be taken into consideration for sure.
Yeah, and I think, Ryan, one thing that you mentioned is basically connecting it to advertising or inventory. One of the major aspects that we want to bring to Flywheel 2.0 is that, meaning connecting market intelligence insights into advertising can create the magic that we're looking for, and also inventory, the third financing, and multi-channel if we are talking about Walmart and so on. That is the goal of what we're trying to build. And I think that's where also the magic lands. As you mentioned, if the organic ranking is a top position, maybe you should move your budget to a different search term, or maybe you should keep doing it. If there's another scenario where, let's say you decided that you don't want to be organically positioned number one, but you advertise on that product at one. There's a lot of other things that we can start doing, and that's the really exciting part about Flywheel 2.0.
Yeah, the connection of it is huge. I mean, as a e-commerce operator, you don't get the luxury of being able to operate in a bubble. Everything that you do has consequences to a completely different aspect of that business, like you're saying, right? If you push advertising too hard and you don't have inventory, you're going to be in a bad scenario. And likewise, if you're not doing this market intel to research what you should be doing for your base, you're going to be making your advertising a lot more challenging. So it all kind of comes together, and really you have to attack it all together in order for it to be successful.
I love that. And kind of getting to that, let's kind of talking about focus areas. And this is, I think, a good way of kind of summarizing what, as a seller, you should really be paying attention to, kind of what we've been talking about, but kind of distilling it down to these points, right? Which is, where's the data coming from, right? Alon's talked about this, right? We've talked about the kind of two different areas, the kind of main areas where you see data sources coming from, whether it's API or whether it's data capture. And how often is that data being collected? I think it's a big one, because if you look at, for example, like those data capturing, right? That could be super, even if it's super accurate. I have a really good idea about where I'm showing up on the SERP page, where my competitors are, what my share of the digital shelf or share of voice is. But it's really critical that you're tracking that over time, because really, if you just capture it, it's a snapshot in time, which may be helpful, but it really doesn't give you what are you going on there, because I don't know where was I last week, where am I going to be next week, where am I tomorrow, how often is that changing? You know, for instance, right, you could look at a search term where if there's a lot of entrenched players, maybe the organic ranks on those search terms, especially on page one, don't change all that much. But if you go to, let's say, a search term that's a little newer, maybe it's, again, something that's maybe more newly popular, maybe around a specific trend, well, there might be a little more volatility in terms of what Amazon's surfacing there. And so you should be able to tell, again, where are those differences and how your strategy, again, should shift kind of based on what you're seeing. And then kind of similarly, right, for these learnings, how can you incorporate them to action? It's going to be talked about, right? Having a more steady stream of when this information is coming in, it gives you the ability to say, okay, if I'm seeing this, maybe I should think about these actions. And I mean, maybe Alon or Ryan, kind of, if you want to chime in here in terms of, like, you know, maybe other thoughts around these kind of issues.
Yeah, I think the one that always comes to me is the how often is the data being collected. I think that idea of a snapshot versus seeing trends is very different. You may not, I think there's a difference in the granularity of your data versus how often, as the third point, do you incorporate that learning into action? Just because you're collecting data, every day or multiple times a day doesn't mean you're doing something with it all the time. But when you get to, let's say, the end of a 2-week period or the end of that month, you want that granularity to be able to see what is the trend that's happening. I mean, it's similar with even the ad aspect of it. I don't check, flywheel my ads every single day, but I know it's doing something every hour, and it's you need that aspect to be able to have it be effective.
Exactly. I think it's super important to also collect the data, a few times per day. I mean, a lot of tools are providing insights on a daily level, and some of them we don't know. We don't know what happened in the background, and it's hard for us to rely on those kind of tools when it comes to advertising. If we actually want to connect the data to advertising and bidding, and around changing the bid every hour, it can be up to every 15 minutes. That data source is super important, and once you're tracking that things on a monthly, yearly level, you can start identifying trends. So that's one of the things that we love about what we're doing, and we can also project a lot of other things through this process.
Yeah, it's a great point. Kind of moving forward, kind of where we talk about using this, right? And we talked about the business purposes earlier in the call. So let's talk about kind of the first one. This is if you're already, right, you're selling on a given marketplace, you're looking to improve your performance. So when we talk about the goals here, maybe you're growing a product, right? For instance, I have a product that's been on Amazon, as an example, for a number of months. It's gaining some traction, but I want it to, become a market leader, right? I want to grow its sales, I want to grow its market share. And kind of similarly, let's say you're very entrenched, right? I've got a product that's been out for years. It's one of the most well-reviewed, right? How do you maintain that position? The idea of kind of brand protection. I think this is a big one. Ryan, you talked about it, right? Is like, I might be ranking number one, but how much of that is, let's say, driven just, okay, I'm organic and I can stick with it. I don't really need to advertise much, but how much of that is driven by, let's say, other advertisers that I might be placing on that same SERP? And this is kind of, it spans both of it, but expanding to other marketplaces, right? If let's say my product is doing really, really well on Amazon US, you could maybe make an inference, is it worth doing so on Amazon Canada, as an example, right? Do I have the ability to do that? And you can take some of these, insights here and kind of port them over to similar markets, as the case may be. But kind of, you guys, in terms of any maybe thoughts around this specific use case?
Yeah, I think the expanding to other markets is an interesting one. A question that I actually get a lot from people who are asking me about just expanding into other marketplaces when they have a product that's doing well on Amazon there's always a difficulty in understanding, like, are you going to do well on that? Is there, everyone knows that there are different, you maybe aren't going to go onto Amazon Canada and see the exact same, sales because you're doing well in the US marketplace. But when you have a strategy on the US marketplace, let's say you're, like for one of ours, we're looking specifically at, stainless steel saute pans for something, and you're looking at the search volumes in the market and who's coming up on that, being able to switch over to another marketplace and at least compare what is happening, it's very useful to then be able to inform a little bit more and not just say, well, I'm going to take a wild guess and hope that, is the volume going to be half of what it is on the US market, or, and so you can look specifically at those search terms and understand, by looking at competitors, looking at traffic that's coming to those, and help, actually figure out what it is that you need to be doing.
Yeah, and kind of getting along with that, I think this is a great graph that kind of illustrates a lot of this, and I definitely encourage folks to kind of put this in their own mind. Kind of, this is an audit that we conduct for certain subsets of our clients, kind of as we're looking at what they've been doing prior to coming to Teikametrics. And this gets at the idea of overbidding versus underbidding on a given search term. I mean, this is really critical, right? When you think about one thing that we love about Teikametrics, the way we've kind of architected ourselves, especially our bidder, is the idea around value per click. We want to maximize value per click, and we want to bid in relation to that value, right? So we don't want to, let's say, overbid, where essentially it's a click that essentially has a lower value, lower potential value. Or alternatively, we don't want to say, if let's say it's a, typically you see this with category terms, where a user doesn't know what brand they want, and a sale there is essentially much more, generally, it's going to be much more likely to be incremental, in that the person who's not, you don't know whether or not they were going to buy your brand or a competitor. Those terms are potentially more valuable. So you can kind of see here that this is a really interesting graph to look at, because what this shows is when you look at a value per click, this is again across a client that we did this audit for. You look at these bubbles, and again, you can kind of see just the amount of investment, right? You see that they're doing obviously a lot of auto campaigns, but really focus on the generic versus branded here, and the competitor terms. So branded terms, I think this gets to a question a lot of folks have, which is, I have these branded terms and they drive sales for me. I'm getting clicks on those ads and I'm driving sales. The issue for that is, right, the likelihood of someone going on a branded term, of your branded term, and not converting on one of your products, your brand's products, is extremely low, right? Amazon is predisposed in the organic rank to put as many of your products in front of that consumer, right? They're trying to foster a great consumer experience. If I search for Adidas shoes, they're going to try to put as many Adidas on that search page as possible. So what you see a lot of is, well, if I'm a consumer and I come there, I search for that search term. I might click, yeah, exactly, that's what I want, the first result, which tends to be a sponsored ad. And so it may look, when you just look at these results, as, wow, this branded search term is doing great for me. I'm getting a ton of sales off it. The ACoS is low. However, are you driving incremental sales? Are you capturing sales you would not have done organically? Now, there's a degree of brand defense, right? You have to kind of walk that line of, I don't want a competitor to bid out on mine. Granted, you do have some advantage there as a seller. If you're the brand that they're searching for, and you're, especially if you're brand registered, Amazon does give you a little bit of preference bid-wise on some of those terms. But look at these look at these rather these generic terms or unbranded terms, and you see how many of them this company's underbidding on. And these terms tend to be more popular than the branded terms generally, and they're more valuable, right? If I capture a sale on those unbranded terms, I'm putting myself in front of a consumer that likely didn't know about me, right? They're doing an initial search, and I can capture that before a competitor does. So those are typically more valuable sales that I can capture there, and your bid should reflect that. So this is something that at Teikametrics, again, we put together this analysis, for clients, again, as part of a larger audit. But this kind of underscores this idea of, like, not all search terms are created equal. And the way you look at the universe of where your products are showing up and how they're showing up is really important, because it should dictate other aspects of your marketing mix, how you're bidding, how aggressive should you be, all this other stuff. So I think this is a really good graph. I don't know if any of you guys kind of have other things to add here, maybe just in terms of your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's really important. I was really interested when I saw this. I think it's a cool analysis to be able to really. I think everyone splits up in this method of this auto generic branded competitor, and you see these groupings, and it's fascinating. I need to get this made for my brands.
Yeah, I love it. And definitely, I mean, I think this is something, it's an ongoing process, right? I mean, Ryan talked about this. This is not a set it and forget it. If you looked at this, if you were this brand and you look at this graph, you might make changes that can help you. Okay, let's try to get these bids more aligned with what the value is. But it's going to be a constant effort, right? Nothing in e-commerce stays static. And similarly, kind of the way you're bidding on terms needs to change based on metrics like conversion rate, conversion volume, and those, right, never stay the same. They just don't. So kind of switching over to kind of, okay, let's talk about research purposes. This is a graph from some research we put out roughly actually a little less than a month ago. This was looking at from 2019. We looked across given categories and we looked at how much did search volume on terms related to those categories change from the pre-Thanksgiving period to kind of these, right, Cyber Week and post Cyber Week, which is kind of interesting because actually what you find, and it's something that we're in the process of studying now, is that even after Cyber Week, conversion rates still go up, search volume still stays, pretty high. So this kind of gives you an idea when you're talking about research, high level things. If I'm looking at a new market, can I see some insights that can help me in terms of any other aspect of the business? I think this one could be a good justification. Let's say if I'm only selling on Walmart, I haven't sold on Amazon.com yet. Is Cyber Week, or is Cyber Week a good time to launch a product? Let's say in a certain category, and you can make an argument that, like, it's more competitive during these times, but there's such a huge volume increase in things like electronics, and you see this in like toys and games, that can very much outweigh, okay, yes, it's going to be more competitive, it'll be slightly more expensive when you're talking about it on a CPC basis. But with that volume increase, this is something we talk about all the time when you're launching products. You need to drive volume. That's the name of the game in order to get a defensible organic position. So even if you know the volume is going to be there, it's almost always going to be worth that increased price, because that's the way you get a defensible position. You don't get it by, I'm going to really be tight on ACoS when I'm launching this product, and I'm going to be tight on efficiency. You need to be willing to say, no, I need to drive sales velocity so that I show Amazon I am the right product for this search. I'm the right product for consumers that search like this, and it's going to just do you better over the long term. So, Alon, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more when you kind of use these like research, type mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I think Ryan and I had the conversation about it a few days ago, when you could see how the trends in the category, how much the sales volume in the category goes up or down. And sometimes you think, oh, maybe I'm not doing everything right, but actually the sales volume is just going down in the entire market. Ryan, do you want to share the example?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important to be looking at getting into this granularity of understanding, the search volumes that are happening within this. The example that Alon was talking about, that we were discussing, is I had this product, and the sales for it started going down dramatically, and I was freaking out trying to figure out, what it was coming from. Was it coming from an ad issue on my end? Was there something wrong with the listing? And sales just kept going down and down. And then as I started looking into the market intel piece of it, the entire market was just dropping down, and you could see the search volume starting to drop down. And it wasn't my product, it was the whole category was coming down during that time. And so it really informs a lot of it. I think the biggest piece of this, people look at how do you grow or succeed with your Amazon business or your Amazon store. I mean, realistically on Amazon, you don't have an Amazon store. You have a very specific category and keyword store. You have thousands of marketplaces that you're trying to succeed on. And so, whether it's, at this level, looking at search volumes and the granularity of your whole category, then you break down into that and look over these different keywords. And you have to understand what's going on with that. Because if you try and just go on and say generically, I want to succeed on Amazon, and you just shotgun it out, good luck. It's going to be a rough road. But I think that the way that you really need to approach it is getting into these insights and really treating each of the categories and search terms like their own stores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a large potential in analyzing these factors. Not if something goes bad, but if something is go well, obviously, different seasons, time zones, and obviously what we had in the past month, the Cyber Week, which everyone had hopefully a good experience with that. We want to give you just a kind of a glimpse of what we're building. So market intelligence is kind of a tool inside of Flywheel 2.0. Currently is presenting BCS, which is kind of brand covered on search. We believe it's the right term to call it instead of share of voice. Basically, how much brand coverage you have on a search term. If it's total, organic, or paid, we obviously have breakdowns on the product and the position. And you can also see it on various marketplaces and different platforms. It's super exciting to start this, and a few folks already have an early access to it through our Flywheel 2.0 program. So we're super excited to take this to the next step.
Yeah, and I think this is, as you look through this, I hope everyone on the call can kind of take a look and kind of envision this in their own brand's context. I think the biggest thing, and Ryan can shed some light on here, is that kind of what we're building and the way kind of our thought process is, and we kind of talked about this. We want to provide kind of a degree of granularity so that, right, as we talked about, right, every search term is its own market, and you have to treat it that way. You have to know who your competitors are, and this provides you kind of a degree of granularity that we think is just going to make a really big difference in terms of your ability to kind of execute. So, I mean, Ryan, I think you've had a little bit of a taste for this, but kind of like how would this kind of change what you're doing?
Yeah, I am one of the lucky ones who's been able to use this. It's really great. Honestly, a lot of the stuff that I've been talking on, and you just mentioned, right, about treating these different keywords very specifically, and getting granular in the areas that you need to be, but not presenting you with so much data that you don't really need. I think the thing that's great about it is that what you have the ability to toggle in this is almost kind of teaching you how you should be approaching market intelligence at both stages of research and operating. So, the pieces of this, that are really important to me specifically, being able to toggle to different keywords is amazing, right? You may, as we said, each keyword is a very different market, and so your competitors in maybe one of your most generic searches is going to be different than your competitors into a step down from that that's a little more specific, and likewise even more so when you're talking about branded search. And the other aspect of it that is really important is to be able to toggle looking at the differences in, right now this is set on total, but you can toggle between organic and paid. And what's interesting about that is I always, as I'm advertising, I'm wondering, who's paying to try and be at the top of these pages, or who's paying to try and be at the top of my branded pages. So it's interesting to be able to see, because those the organic competitors that are there are not the same as the ones who are paid competitors, and you can use that as a way to even understand. Let's say you see a brand that is organically ranked #1, And then when you go to paid, the person who's number one isn't even in the top 5, for organic. That they're making a push. They see that as an important aspect, and they're targeting that. It's a really useful way to be able to approach it. And I think one of the bigger things about this too is, e-commerce is a very data-driven undertaking. There's a level of, it is what it is. The numbers will speak for themselves, and your assumptions are probably not what you should be going off of. You can find the data to actually make the right decisions. And so, there's been a lot of times where, I think my biggest competitors are, X, Y, and Z. And then as I start looking at these different keywords and different categories, I'm seeing that that isn't the case. Yes, they are in this sense, but they're not, in another grouping of keywords. So, it's this really just the interface of how you are able to switch between these has been really useful. I've been using it for one of our brands specifically, and it's been a game changer for us.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. So, along with that, if you're on the call, let's first kind of go takeaways, and we'll kind of talk a little about this. But right, look at what you're using for market intelligence currently. Right, we've talked about we're offering a Teikametrics, but even outside of that, right, maybe you don't have access to it, whatever. There's still stuff you should be doing now in terms of best practices to put yourself in a better position, especially as we get to 2021. And right, I think the biggest thing is understand what you're looking at and understand where the blind spots are, because that's just it's going to allow you to make better decisions when you're thinking about, well, am I getting this, let's say, from Amazon Retail Analytics, which is obviously, it's Amazon's own data, and that can be very useful when you talk about, like, for instance, a keyword popularity and how that changes. You can look at that. It's a little more manual process when you're doing this, by yourself, but it's possible to kind of look at this stuff. But remember what you're not seeing, right? What you're not seeing is really who's showing up on that given search page. How is that search page changed, over the time? So there's different blind spots here, and everyone, on the call, kind of as you step back from this, take a look at what you've got and what you're not seeing, and just how that should color your overall analysis. And to that end, right, Amazon Insights, there's a lot of players out there that provide this, again, both free and paid. Walmart's a little more limited, so obviously it's a newer marketplace, so there are options out there. It's a little, for right now, a smaller universe. But what option you choose, and maybe it's multiple options, it really should be based on what you're trying to do, right? Are you trying to outflank existing competitors that right now are kind of the top of the top of the heap from market share perspective? Are you looking to, again, just shore up your own position? Are you looking to, I want to see about other marketplaces and what what my potential is there? Each of those kind of demands a different look at the data and what what you're gathering. So really, really think about this. And we've kind of touched on this. Alon touched on this, and Ryan touched on this. But what are the ways you could potentially drive interoperability, right? How can you tie those insights into actual decisions? So it's easy to kind of get this wealth of data. There's no shortage of data out there, but how do you turn that into something that is like, I'm going to take this, and if I'm seeing this trend, here's a likely action that I'm going to take to help mitigate trouble or double down if I'm seeing success, right? It's super important. And kind of the rule of thumb here, right? Again, a lot of ways to get data. You need to really understand are you going to get a view in terms of like what's actually going on and being able to make decisions. So really, it's kind of a good way to kind of think about this. And Alon talked about this, but I'm emphasizing it. The reason we're building Flywheel 2.0 and the reason why we're putting market intelligence in there is because interoperability is so key, and market intelligence can really feed that, both across all your kind of critical market intelligence operation, or market intelligence informed operations, right? So inventory, ads management. We talk about capital financing, whether again to move to a new marketplace. This matters, and I really want to encourage you that if you're interested at all in this, at least just seeing what's out there, sign up if you're not already for this early access. We're building this. Even what you saw right there from a screenshot, that's going to get changed. It's going to get better. There's a lot more stuff that's in the horizon, and we're going to, as we release this, we want folks that are on this call to going to be on the front lines in terms of getting access to that and getting a sneak peek as it's available. And the way we do that is signing up for early access. There's an address here. I'll obviously send it as part of the follow-up email. And then as you sign up, you can just select that I'm interested in market intelligence as an option. And basically, if you do that, right, you're going to be among the first to get access to it as it becomes available, as we continue to kind of roll it out on a, kind of more, again, sneak peek type basis, be asking for feedback, et cetera. So if you want to kind of get a taste of this, if you're already using market intelligence from someone else and want to see what else is out there, really, really encourage you to do this. And we'd love to kind of get your thoughts kind of as we continue to iterate on this. And with that, I think we can get to questions. We got about five full minutes left, so that should be good. So this is a good one from Keegan here. Keegan asks, kind of, thank you for bringing up the question if ads are worth it if you're ranking well organically. Is there a method of analysis or general rule of thumb used to determine if an ad will supplement an organic ranking versus cannibalizing it? So, I mean, I'm sure you guys might maybe have some thoughts on this. I'd say generally what we've seen when we've looked kind of, when we are talking to clients about this, a lot of this is very contextual, right? Okay, if it's, let's say, your own branded term, right? You might think, well, am I cannibalizing myself because I'm probably already ranking #1 organically? That's potential. But remember, this is, if it's let's say your own branded term, you may need to defend it because if you let's say are one of the bigger players in the space or people know about you, right? You may have people that are obviously trying to bid against you. But in that case, what I'd highly recommend is if you are, let's say, going to take a sponsored brand spot or sponsored product spot on your own branded term, use products that are not your top sellers. Because if it's a top seller, someone's probably already going to buy that anyway. Try to, maybe it's newer products, maybe it's higher margin products, maybe it's again, ones that are maybe a little bit more long tail. Use those spots intelligently so you can still take that top spot, but you're potentially to a loyal customer who might see they're getting something new, and you're giving them an opportunity to not just essentially pay for a click that you would have gotten to your top selling product otherwise. I don't know if Ryan, you kind of have other thoughts around that.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. There's a lot of really interesting ways that you can use it. The best, as you're saying, for sponsored product is, again, use one that doesn't have as good of sales. Sponsored brand is a really interesting one because you're obviously able to showcase 3 different, products on there. And, I do a similar strategy for this as well, where one of them I'll keep is whatever that top product is. So you show people, hey, this brand has, whatever product has a ton of reviews and it looks good, when someone sees it. But then the other 2 are maybe ones that you want to promote. They're newer products and you want to tie them into the brand. However, I mean, the biggest thing that even, comes into it if you're making a decision of, maybe you only have one product. So there is and I've had that for Air Vinyl, where there was a product where, for a lot of keywords, it was just the one product. But what I noticed was, as I was a smaller brand, no one was really showing up for that. But as I started growing the brand, there were a ton of people just throwing their product into that spot. And I did see, a bit of a dip away from that comparatively to when I put the sponsored product in place to now fill it. And in that case, I did have the exact same product showing twice. What I tried to do in that, if you have a product that has variations, maybe try and put one of your lower selling color SKUs or size SKUs or like something. So in that case, I had it was a black leather case and a brown leather case. The black one sold better, so I put the sponsored product as the brown one, so both variations showed up. At least it's not a duplicate. So you can get a little creative with it, but I do think it's important to utilize it.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, Alon, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that we realized, just adding on what Ryan said, is sometimes your sponsored position, if I'm talking about sponsored product for a second, is actually lower than your organic position. And that's something that you can actually utilize by and through Flywheel 2.0. And that's super, super interesting. But yeah, I think we can continue to other questions as we are running out of time.
Yeah. Let's keep going. And again, if we don't get to it, or I'm gonna download all the questions after, and if I can, I'm gonna try to email you with answers after the fact. I think some people were asking about that graph we showed around the Cyber Week activity. What that was showing, for folks that didn't know, is we were actually looking at basically the frequency of search terms in that vertical and how often they were coming again versus that pre-Thanksgiving baseline. So again, it was not like the number of search terms, it was more how often, right, those category terms were searched. Here's from Jennifer here. Can you define kind of granularity and I guess this sense of market intelligence that you are using, and kind of why is that granularity important? And maybe Alon, this is a good question for you.
Yeah, there are two ways to look at the granularity when gathering data. So one of them is, you want to make sure that the data is accurate, and we discussed it, but in the same way, you also want to know the trends, what people are searching for, how they're searching for it, what's the user activity, and basically the user journey. We can see, and we saw a lot of users that, do not start the journey actually on Amazon, or starting from other places, or ads that Amazon is activating throughout the web and different websites that actually brings more traffic to your website. So you can also see and get data on other data sources that's super interesting. And by that, kind of trying to predict more and more trends in the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we talked about this a little bit, and we'll probably wrap up, but right, the best takeaway, which I know we've said it multiple times, but that each search term is its own market. And the ability to kind of not just look at, okay, I'm going to look at this bucket of, okay, this whole marketplace or anything. Like if you're looking at a specific search term, granted, there's certain things you can do, certain things you can't do, but it gives you much, more finer lay of the land in terms of, right, to Ryan's point, if it's a branded term, who's kind of trying to hone in on your turf? Is there anybody there, right? That's a big question. If it's a category term, what are the brands that essentially are going to be your top competition? Who are the folks that you need to leapfrog to get those big positions, and how are you going to do that? Maybe it's some combination of product content. And then if it's a competitor term, it may be even as simple as, am I showing up at all on those competitor terms, even if I'm targeting them? How aggressive do I need to be? These are major questions, and you have to think about it in this granular way to kind of, as you make tweaks to your strategy, because again, it's always changing. You keep track of that stuff. So we're at time there. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Alon, for coming on. I think this was a great session. Thank you all for the questions. Again, for the folks, if we didn't get to your question, I'm going to try to get to you after the fact, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all for hopping on the line. Again, you'll get a recording of the session along with the slide deck roughly 24 hours from now, so keep an eye out for that. And looking forward to see you on the next one. Have a good one.